Hey JD, it sounds like you might be muted.
Oh, well, my mic somehow turned off, so I didn't realize that you guys couldn't hear me. So let me repeat some of that. Um, all I said is our webinars are every other month, and I recommend that you sign up for our mailing list, which I just put a link in the chat. That's how we're sending out the invites. Let me go ahead and mute everybody. Okay. And then I was just mentioning our wiki page, which is where the recordings for these will go. So if you're looking, or if you have to jump off today or whenever you watch this, you'll find it on our wiki page. Probably, give us a couple days to post it, but we typically get it up there pretty fast. As long as the wiki page has a bunch of other training videos and help documents there too, so it's a good resource. Before we get started, not to overshadow the awesome topic of special benching, but if you haven't heard, the new release of ORD is out, and to answer the questions that we're about to get bombarded with, is we are looking at it right now, and we'll look to move to it, as soon as we can. So if you guys are more interested in that, here's a link to their help page with all their listed updates. They're also going to do a webcast that you can sign up for that will go over some new features, which I just put that link in. And then there is also a YouTube playlist that has a bunch of videos going over some new features. So if you guys are interested in kind of what the new stuff is in that version, there's some resources for you. But I would recommend that you wait until after this awesome webinar to go check those resources out. But figured I'd get that out of the way now. So on to the topic of special benching, which I do want to start out saying that this will go probably closer to an hour and a half versus an hour. I know originally it was scheduled for an hour, so if you guys have to jump off, by all means, just want to give everyone the kind of warning up front as I tried to cut stuff out, but I couldn't cut more than an hour and a half for what I wanted to show. But anyways, after this meeting, I am requesting constructive feedback. Don't just tell me you hate it. That's not going to do us any good. But some of the goals in trying to model special benching is just to be able to model it, automate the earthwork quantities, and provide acceptable workflows is kind of the goals I had going into this. So a little bit of kind of what we're doing now. It sounds like for the most part, we're just cutting cross sections and drawing it in manually. Is the kind of current workflow. So looking at going into ORD and modeling that and being able to use that model to get the maybe cut fill quantities and things like that. So I'm going to go over today. So we're going to mainly focus in on a top-down approach. You'll see at the end I started working on some other ones, but as I go through it, the templates that we're going to go over is really top-down. So you're setting the horizontal location and vertical location at the top, and then as your bench works down, kind of determines the horizontal location at the bottom. All right, so let's quickly move on into this. So all of the benching stuff that I've set up here for special benching is really broken down into three pieces. So like a top template, a bottom template, and a bench template. And I take those three different templates and I combine them into one to form a special benching template, if you will. Okay. So if you need more benches, then you just keep adding in the bench template. I've probably, I think I've tried every which way you can imagine, and I found a lot of ways that don't work. So some of you guys might, ask why didn't I use, the built-in benching functionality, and that just didn't work for how these are going to work, or what our needs are for special benching. So to kind of sum that up a little bit more graphically, I just took a screenshot, and so when I refer to a top, this is one component that I separated out at the top, and then I have a bench component, and that is what you would just repeat if you had more than one, and then you have a bottom kind of template. So at the very least, you could have just a top and a bottom for just like a single bench, and then if you have additional ones, you just keep adding those in. And I'm gonna go over this in videos to come, but trying to set it up so it makes sense the way I put these together. So before I show you like the template, I want to just preface this with don't get overwhelmed by the look of the template. There's more points in there, but those are really just there as helpers to kind of help edit the template better. So some of those helper points there's a checkpoint in for every bench, so that you kind of have something to cross check to see if you are within or outside of that 8-foot horizontal distance that's required to be away from your proposed grading when you look at the geotechnical note of what the requirements are for special benching. So I threw a checkpoint in there, and then I also threw off to the side a point to control that bench elevation. As I added more things to it, it made it a lot easier to throw something off to the side, and hopefully you'll see that as I go through this today. So when I say that checkpoint, here's what I'm talking about. It's SB for special benching, and then checkpoint, and it's tied to be 8 feet away from your proposed grading. And then in a dynamic cross section view, if you bring it up, I made it show kind of like a vertical line to kind of call it out a little better. So that's something that is more there as a checkpoint. It's not really doing anything other than that. So like if for some reason your bench does go on the other side, it's not like telling you can't do that. You got to look at it and know you can't do that. But uh, I figured that would be a little helpful having a vertical line just to separate it out a little better from maybe some other null points you might have. And then the seek elevation point, here's what I mean by when I say throw it off to the side. So this is actually an end condition, and it's hidden, so you won't see the line. And what I've done is in the end condition properties, the target has been set to elevation. And so when you do that, instead of this end condition targeting like active surface like we normally do, it's going to go to a specific elevation. And you can key in that, I shouldn't have clicked. You can key in that specific elevation in the vertical option right here. So right now I'm telling this point to go to elevation 700. Okay. So that's kind of how they're set up. And then a little video here showing how it works. So if I go in and move this elevation point vertically, you can see that it is controlling all of these points off to the left. So the checkpoint, your actual benching, all of it's being controlled over here. That kind of just makes it easier when we get to the later steps of needing to maybe change elevations from station to station or things like that. I figured you guys would be like, well, if I need to control a point to change elevation, which point do I need to control? Is it the inside point? Is it the outside point? Rather than messing around with that, it's just easier to say this elevation point is what's controlling it. Furthermore, you'll see as I get later on, there are more points here, which further complicated this area. So to try to keep it simple and easy to understand, that's kind of what I've done. So let's get into how you might set up a template here. So I have a template set up here with just maybe it's some widening work. So you can see there's just some roadway pieces in there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm gonna bring in the special benching template and show you guys what kind of workflow it might be to set one of these templates up. So ideally, you'll probably make a different template for every time you need another bench. So you make one for like one bench, you make another one for two benches and three benches, and then you just swap them out when you need to add that additional bench. So I have two kind of already started here. You can see I have a one and a two in the name. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go up and do the ODOT tab up the top, and we'll go into end conditions, and then you'll see a special benching folder, and that's not released yet, and I might change the way that's organized a little bit, but it'll be in that area. So I'm going to the top down ones, and you'll see there are those templates that I talked about, the top, the bottom, and the bench. Those kind of pieces that combine together to make that special benching template. And then that slide stabilization one is it's kind of where you have that like ditch at the bottom. But if we take a look at the templates up at the top, which kind of got a little ahead of myself there. Let me jump back over a little bit. So that what I've done is I've actually put together 1 through 5 benches already just to save time. If we need to put more in there, we can. And so when I take a look at the first one, you'll see it has some proposed grading in there, and well as the top and bottom of that bench. And if I go to the next one, you'll see there's an additional bench added. And then if I go to the third one, there's another bench added up to 5. So it kind of makes just easier to just start out with a kind of pre-made template. I think 5 should probably suffice in most cases, but I can always throw another one in there. But I'll have a video that shows how to put these together. I had to cut that one out for time's sakes for this presentation. But so those are kind of your starting point, and all we're going to do is we're going to take whatever number of benches we want to make in our template. We're just going to take it and drag it in, just like you would normally do with like say an end condition. So in here, I'm gonna grab that first one, I'm gonna drag it over, I'm gonna drop it off of that edge there. Okay. And so now I got some work to do. So obviously, since this is top-down approach, that top point on the special bench there needs to be set of where it should go. It doesn't have any constraints on it. You have to tell it, okay, here's where I want to start this. Here's the vertical. Here's the horizontal location. Okay, so I think in this example, I'm talking about the checkpoints again. So if I move that top point, I'm just going to do add constraints, and I'll do a full constraint. And for this demo, I'm just going to throw it, right there at that inside shoulder. So granted, you might have someplace different to put it, but for this demonstration, that's where I threw it. And you'll see that the checkpoint automatically moved up with it. So you can see kind of where that 8-foot horizontal offset would be up there. Okay. Now the other thing that you can do is define where you want that bottom elevation to be. Now, granted, this is probably going to change as you go throughout the stations, but you could look at your cross sections and get a general idea of where that might be and give this template a good starting spot. So when you initially throw this into your corridor, you get something that looks decent, right? I mean, if you tell the elevation to go to elevation, 1,000, and your project is down at, I don't know, elevation 600, 700, that's going to look pretty stupid when that elevation goes all the way up, way above your roadway, right? So this is purely just giving it a starting point. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over and I'll look at my active template tab. And when I go into components, you're going to see one that says bottom seek elevation. That is the hidden end condition there. So I can just double click on that and I will get that little prompt, and I could say, you know what, I want this bottom elevation to be around this, whatever you want it to be. I think I type in 590 or something. So again, it's more of a starting point. I realize that it won't be held through the whole corridor. And then you would kind of repeat that process for the additional benches that you might go to. So I think I go to the second one now and do the same thing. So this time I'm going to drag in that slope prepare 2. I have 2 benches here. I'll give the same starting spot. I'm just adding in a full constraint here. And then I could do the same thing for the elevations, but since I have another bench here, you'll see that there are 2. So there's that bottom, and then there's a seek elevation. And then for each additional bench you add in, there's just a number at the bottom. So it'll be seek elevation 1, seek elevation 2 for each of those additional benches. Okay. So really, I haven't done too much. We just dropped in a template and changed, a couple points. All right. So if I jump forward just a tad bit, I believe I should be throwing in a corridor. Take a look at what we initially get here. I'm also talking at the bottom. This endpoint will just go out and search the active surface horizontally to kind of close it off. Just meets back in with your existing ground. Apparently I had a lot to talk about when I made this video. I'll talk about what those start break and end break points are in a little bit, but the outside point, you could change your initial bench width if you wanted to. I think the default right now is just 5, but you'll see some more ways to control this later on. But I did throw a label in there, so you could change those up as needed for like a starting point. So now I'm gonna go over and I'm going to place a corridor in here. So new corridor, and I chose the 2 bench template that I made. I'm just gonna throw that one through the whole thing. So I'll select my template here. And then I'll give it a station range. So I think I just did a short section for this demonstration. And then if I open up my cross-section view, we kind of take a look at what we got here. So again, it's just a starting spot. I think my surface was bad. I just grabbed some data, and you notice that bottom line is kind of going a little far horizontally, but there you can see those checkpoints coming in with vertical lines. And I think if I go a couple stations more, show you what it looks like. But next thing we're going to want to do is kind of start controlling, maybe how we want to change the elevation from station to station. So I believe that'll be in the next video, but you'll see how, that bottom point is kind of going horizontally and seeking to end at the existing ground. So there's just, I think I have a bad surface. You'll see in the next video that all that gets cleaned up. But I don't think you'll normally see it do that. It should have just stopped at the first time it hit the existing ground. All right, so moving on to the next video. So we just kind of threw something in there, and now we're going to need to do most likely a whole bunch of edits, right? All right, so one way we can control these edits is dealing specifically with the elevation of each bench is by using profiles and point controls. So I jumped over to my alignment file. If you notice in the video, it says BK. So I jumped over to my alignment file and I referenced in that corridor file. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create profiles to represent the elevation that I want each of these benches at a given station. Okay. So I brought up my profile view over here, and you can start drawing in these profiles just using any of the profile tools. Maybe you like doing the complex IPI, and you can kind of use your cross section view and go back and forth to kind of jump through the cross sections and take a look at what's going on. Which apparently, did I stop it? Is it? Huh. Oh, somehow it stopped, but let me jump forward here. So I'm just talking about I need to control these benches to be at different elevations throughout my cross sections here. So I'm gonna start drawing in some stuff here. So when you have your cross section view open, if you turn on your running coordinates, I wanted to note that your running coordinates are giving you your elevations and your offset in there. So if you're going station by station, you can get where your cursor is or a quick snap. You don't have like full blown capabilities because this is dynamic view, but you can kind of come in and get some quick data as you're looking at your cross sections and maybe making some determinations. Or if you need something a little bit more I guess, traditional or set in stone, you could just create a couple temporary cross section drawings, and then use those. Then you can do all of your migration tools with that. But so coming back over to the vertical tools, you could do that complex by PI with Civil AccuDraw, and you can key in stations and elevations. And so I can key in like I want at station 4 plus 50. I want the elevation to be, I don't know, 596.1. And then you could click and move on to the next point, and you could keep going and you could look at your cross section. But I think that might be a little tedious to jump back and forth and look at each of the cross sections. So maybe what you do instead is just throw a bunch of dummy points on there. And so I think that's what I'm about to do here is I'm just gonna throw in roughly every 50 feet. I'm just gonna throw in a quick point, for wherever that span is. So I'm doing this really just to give a starting point. So now, maybe I did that. Now I have all the vertexes and I can just change those vertexes, you know. So it would be really easy just to open the table editor. So I came up to the top, hit table editor, and I click on that profile I just made, and I get a nice table view. So I could easily come in here and just fix all these stations to be like even stations. So, I'm gonna do 5, 550, 6, and that moves all my vertexes to all those key stations that I'm gonna end up creating cross sections at those locations for, right? And then the next column is elevations. So if I did cut a temporary drawing models for cross sections, I could use that and just quickly type in those elevations as I see fit. So the cool thing is you're kind of managing it not cross section by cross section now. It's more dynamically linked together, if you will. So it's easy to come back and change a given vertex, and you can click on that line too and just change a given vertex elevation as well. But I think that table editor could definitely help speed up some of the input time. And so you would kind of repeat that process for each of your benches that you might have, right? So I paused the video and I just drew in a bunch of those already. So you kind of see kind of a vertical view of how your benches are coming in. So granted, most people are used to working from the cross section approach, so it's a little bit of a change, but you can still look at your cross sections to help you generate this. there's pros and cons with doing it manually like we've been doing it in this way. I'm not gonna sit here and say that this is the best way. This is just what I've came up with looking at the situation. Okay, so now that we've added those profiles, we need to come back to our corridor file. So here I jumped back into my corridor file, and we need to create point controls. And so what a point control we're doing is we're saying, hey, I want to control this point in my template to match something else. And so what I want to match is I want to match these profiles, and I want to match it just vertically. So I'm basically saying make this point go to this elevation along the corridor here. So I'm going to give this point control a description. Maybe it's the bottom ditch elevation or bottom bench elevation. So then I'm going, what point do you want to control? So again, remember, I put that point off to the side to make it easy. So if I look at my points over here, the one that says bottom um, elevation, I kind of named it so that you could see it's the elevation point. That's the point I want to control. And then now what do you want to control it about? So you can click your center line and then it'll populate your profile list. Or if you have a profile view open, like I do, I could just come over and select that profile as well. So either way works, but you notice I selected that, and then over in my tool dialog, it shows that profile, which I named SB bottom. So whatever you named that profile is what would show up. So you want to, basically all I'm doing is saying control this elevation or control this ditch elevation to match this profile. So my vertical offsets are 0 because I don't want to offset from that profile. And I don't know if you noticed, but it did move that bottom bench up. So now you see that that top bench is lower until we add that point control as well, right? Since we moved that bottom one up, there's nothing telling that top ditch to move up too. So we'll add another point control to control off of that profile. And so that we can easily just come back and update this profile as we need to, and the template will just automatically update. So here I'm adding another point control to push that bench up higher. So what you want to name these, technically the top bench, if you look at the template points, does not have a number at the end of it. So if you're trying to match up these point control names to the template point names, your top bench would just be like bench or bench 0, and then the next bench would be, bench 1, bench 2, and so on. So when you look at the template, you kind of see that. But so I come down here and I want that elevation point, right? So as I add more benches in, I'd see elevation 1, elevation 2, kind of in that order. I tried to set it up so that when you just add some in, the auto numbering on the templates doesn't like get in the way. But so after I add this, I'll select my profile. Jump forward a little bit here. And so after I added that first one, you notice it didn't move, right? But the second one did as I jumped to station forward. That's because if you look over at my profile view, my profile ends here, but I was at station 5, which was right here. So I didn't have a profile at that location to tell that bench what to do. So it just stayed put, right? And so that's because right here I only needed one. So in the next video, I'm going to go over how to transition between number of benches. But hopefully that's pretty straightforward so far. I mean, really just we're telling our benches that we want to control the elevation by these profiles, and then we can just modify the profiles as needed. Okay. So moving on to the next video, should be transitioning. Okay, so what happens when we need to transition between maybe one bench, 2 benches, or 2 to 3, or 3 back down to 2? So the way that's going to work is back to those templates, right? So I was like saying you basically would make a different template for each number of benches that you need. So we're gonna take those other benches and we're gonna drop them in the locations that we want. Maybe just one bench. So in here, what I have, I'm at station for 4 plus 50, and you'll see that, or I'm at station 5, sorry, I'm at station 5, and you see that I have the 2 benches, um, but at station 4 plus 50, I only want 1 bench. And so everything before 4 plus 50 is 1 bench. And then from 4 plus 50 to 5 would be some kind of transition to get me to 2 benches, right? So the first thing we need to do is we need to drop in the template from station 4 to 4 plus 50 to represent our 1 bench instead of 2 benches. Okay, and I clicked it again. I gotta stop doing that. So what I'll do is I'll come up and I'm gonna show you that I've made a couple more. I went while the videos, I paused and I made some more in there up to like 4. So what I'm gonna do is I'm doing new template drop, and I'm gonna select the first template that I made with just 1 bench in there, and then I want to drop that in from station 4 to 4 plus 50. Okay. And then my drop interval, I forgot to mention this earlier. I'm setting these as 10. That's because my corridor feature definition is set to conceptual, which means the multiplier is 5. So if your interval is 10 and your multiplier is 5, that's going to give you drops every 50 feet, which is probably what you're going to end up doing when you cut your cross section. So you really only need your drop locations at the same kind of span that you're going to do cross sections. Just makes it easier as you're navigating through your cross sections. So that's why when I hit forward and back, I'm jumping 50, because it's just taking me to the next drop location. So at 4 plus 50, what I got going on now is I have basically both of the templates showing, right? I got my single bench showing and my double bench, because that's right where my drop location is, or my template drops are coming together, which obviously that doesn't look good, right? So we need to kind of tell it how we should be transitioning into our second bench, because right now we're just saying right here, just show up, show that second bench up, right? So one way to do this is just through the profile view, right? That bench elevation is just too low right there. So if we had a profile telling it to match up with the elevation of our single bench, that would clean it up, right? So that's one way you could do it, is just have the profile tell this top bench to be right here, right? Then they're right on top of each other. So we'll have to go back to our BK file, and we'll have to add a piece to our top profile to tell it how to do that, right? So let's jump over to our BK file, and then in our profile view, I'm just going to come up to my vertical tools, and I'm going to add in I'm just going to create a new profile here, just a regular line, profile line, not regular line, but it doesn't really matter what feature definition you use, because we're going to add it to this one. So you could use civil AccuDraw here. So I'm saying, hey, at station 4 plus 50, I want the profile offset. And then I can hit the O key and then the C key and say, this is the profile I want to offset from. So I'll select that bottom profile. And then I'll just say, yeah, I want offset of 0. So that will lock me in to that elevation right at that location on that profile. So I could click, and then I come over and I can kind of snap to the beginning of my top profile elevations, right? So that tells it how to kind of transition into that bench, right? But I need to add that to the profile line, because right now they're 2 separate lines here. So I can come over and hit the modify button, and there's an append profile element button. I don't know if you guys knew that was there or not, but you could just select your main profile and then click on that, and it will insert that new piece into your profile. And now you see it's all one complex, and you can open the table editor and you can take a look and see that it did add it in there. So that that's a quick workflow how to come back and maybe add a piece. So then if I jump back to my corridor file, you'll see my point control already took over and moved that up. You got to make sure your point control is going far enough. So depending on where you set those point controls, keep an eye out for that. But as I rotate around, you can kind of see it just introduces that bench. So now I'm not a special benching expert, so I don't know exactly how these should be introduced. I thought that looked pretty good, but if they need to be introduced differently, then we can use our corridor edit tools to do those things, either more point controls, parametric constraints. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure on that. But so just another example here, as I move into more benches here, I need to do the same thing, right? So if I clean these profiles up to tell it how to introduce them, it'll kind of just make my model look a lot cleaner without too much effort, I think. So first thing we need to do is we need to do another template job, right? So I already made a template for having 3 benches. As you can see, I've selected it. So, just pick where that third bench starts. And then you can just kind of have it go the rest of your corridor. And as you work your way down, you can add more template drops in there to increase or decrease the number of benches, right? So there, I'm just going to add that drop in. Let me jump forward a little bit here. Saves us some time. So the same thing we did before there is just we add a template drop and then the point controls. So here's kind of a look at more of the ending after I've added those profiles and template drops, and you kind of get a 3D model looking something like that. Okay, you can look at it over here in your cross-section view. You can kind of go through and take a look at what's going on. But we're not done. But I was transitioning. It's kind of a simple workflow of how you might transition between the number of benches. Hopefully that was understandable. You just add some template drops and you're still controlling it based off of that profile point control to get the transition to clean up. Yep. So another thing that you can run into is a crossover break. So occasionally you might have your special benching might actually cross over into existing or on the other side of existing, and that technically would create a little fill section. But you're not going to have them do that. So some people they might just push their bench back more so they don't have a fill condition. But I've also seen where they just don't show that and they just follow down existing in between. So I was going to show how you can achieve that, and the templates are already set up to do this. And I was going to post a question here after a poll and ask if people want that to be done automatically or not. But basically, we need some extra points in here so that when we go to do cut fill quantities, it doesn't use this as fill, right? So initially, when they come, we want this initial cut to go from existing to our bench. We need that to be basically only in cut to get the quantities to work right. So if I right there, I did edit station. And so when I do edit station, I'll go over this a little more, but what I wanted to show is that when I edit station, you can see those points are showing up right where the existing ground is coming through. Okay, and so I'm going to show how I've set this up. So it does this kind of automatically, but it only does it when you're actually come to the other side of your ground. Like up here, where I'm still on the left side, the cut side, it didn't do that because it didn't need to, right? but over here it did. So let me jump over to a template here and kind of show you what I've done to set this up. I went back and forth on if this should be automatically in the template or if the person should have to add it in. So that's what kind of the poll question that'll come up later. We'll be asking you guys for some feedback. So Wade's done is all those points I showed you earlier. You saw there was a start break and an end break point. That's there already. It was on top of your outside point right here. So I got this end break over here and start break. That's there on every template already. That part's going to stay. It's the part of should I have those automatically move when you get into that fill condition or not. And so the way I set it up was I had to add one more helper point in here. So you notice I'm about to open up the helper point properties here. Jump forward. So there is this helper point right here. And what I've done is I've locked it to this bench elevation and I've just told it to project to the surface. So that helper point, wherever that surface ends up being, it's going to go there, but stay at that elevation of that bench. Okay. So wherever that ends up being. And then my breakpoint, what I've done is said, you know what? I want it to either go to that helper point or go to this outside point, whichever one is more to the left or less, or the horizontal minimum between the two. That's what this constraint is doing, horizontal minimum. It said, look, I got this helper point, I got this outside point. I want you to tie to whichever one is minimum, is the smaller one, horizontally. So that way, if I'm in a fill condition, so the ground somewhere over here, that will make my helper point be the lower one. So then my breakpoint will tie to it. But if I'm in that cut condition, then I will tie to my outside point because that's the lower one. So here what I did is I just moved that point off to the side so you kind of see. As I drag my helper point, once I get past the outside point, it says, oh, I got to tie to my outside point. So I don't know. Hopefully that made sense. It's really just taking the smaller of the two. It's kind of how you can have your templates do a quick, like, almost logic based if then, so you can get a little bit of I want it to do this if this happens or this if this happens. You just need that extra helper point to achieve something like that. So I do the same thing on the end break as well, except this time it's gonna the helper point's going to be a vector offset along this, and then it will project to the surface just along that vector. And then this time I use a vertical minimum rather than a horizontal minimum. So the same concept, you know, if you're in a fill condition, then you know technically your ground's going to hit somewhere over here. So then I want that helper point to show up here. But if you're in a regular cut condition where your ground's over here somewhere, then I don't really care about that break point showing up. So the reason I have to add those in is if you add them in later on, you kind of need all the templates to have them. Or when we get to the next step, it just doesn't work. So if as long as you use the templates, you won't run into the problem. So I realized that was probably a little bit more advanced or confusing. I'd be happy if anyone has questions later on to go over with them. But again, I'm debating if I should have that in there automatically or not. If you don't ever run into that situation, it doesn't really matter. So I'll ask that question here in a second. But you don't have to do anything if I have it in there from the start. It'll just automatically work like that. So that is the crossover break. How you might handle that situation. Again, some people might just push their bench so they don't have to even worry about it. Okay. So with that, I wanted to go over kind of an alternative. Oh, I went too far, right? Okay. Controlling bench widths. So I wanted to show two different ways to control the bench width. This first way is more of just, just setting in straight values for the bench width, which could get pretty tedious, and I don't really know if people are going to do it this way. But I'll show it this way, and then I got another way to show you afterwards. So what I'm talking about in here is all of these benches, they have a label assigned to them. So if you look, this bench width label, and so there's just 3 benches here. So there's three points being controlled by that. So we could use that to control it, like I showed earlier. We could change the default value if you wanted to. But if you needed to maybe change the widths at a given station, here's where I'm like, right now the bench width is controlling all. The label is the same for all 3 of them. So that's the default right now. But I'm still wondering if I should change the default so that maybe there's numbers so you can control each one of these individually. So I'll post that question as well. But that's kind of what I'm leaning towards, just switching it so that you control each one individually. But anyways, here's a kind of a more tedious process if you need to change a bench width, say at a given station or something. You could just use a parametric constraint. So we can come in and add a parametric constraint and use that label on that constraint to say, hey, from this station to this station, maybe I need it to be this bench to be a certain width. All right, so maybe 6 was 50 to 7. I need I'll give it a label. So the constraint label is the bench width or bench width 2, or, granted, however we set those labels up. So bench width, if I choose that one, I'm going to control that constraint. So maybe I need to go from, I don't know, 5 to 5.5 or something. You could just, I guess I'm doing 5.5 to 5.5 in the video, but so that's one way you could control it. Now the tedious side here is, if you're changing this at every station and every bench, that's a lot of parametric constraints to add. So I don't know if that's the best approach or not. If they're relatively constant, maybe it's not so bad, but uh, so that's really the one way. It's kind of more basic, just set the width of the bench to what you want. Okay. So what I wanted to show was a way that I think people hopefully will like better is on these templates, we could have the bench, instead of just being based off of the width, we can base it off of other points, like maybe this checkpoint, right? So we could say, you know what, I want to get my cut down as much as I can. So I want this bench to get as close to that checkpoint as I can. So you could come in here, and what we can do is on the outside bench points, which I should be opening up here in a second, we could say, you know what, I want to horizontally match up with my checkpoint. So I'm coming in here and I'm going to change my horizontal constraint on this outside point. I'm going to change it. So I'm going to get rid of my label because it's not really going to represent the bench width anymore. And I'm going to change that constraint to be based off of the checkpoint. So if I put in a value of 0, now I've forced this bench to tie to that my minimum allowed horizontal distance from my proposed grading. Okay. Now this point that was over here, the helper point, it just doesn't move because it's a projected surface point. You didn't have to do what I just did there. All I did was remove the constraint, add it back to get it to move in place. So if I go down to the next one, maybe I want to do the same thing and change the horizontal to be constrained about my checkpoint. So I came in here, and now that's gonna give me, it's gonna tie me to my checkpoint, right? Okay. Again, that helper point, if I just remove the constraint and hit apply, it moves it back in line, and then I can add it right back. You don't have to do that. It's just annoying to see it off to the side. It doesn't move when you have that project on. But so that handles just tying it. But what happens when we run into this situation where we have that fill condition? What if we just wanted to push our bench over to ground? Um, and so what we can do is the same thing we kind of did with our breakpoints. We could come in and say, hey, this outside point, instead of automatically tying to my checkpoint, let's do a horizontal minimum and say between my checkpoint and my um can I have myself my breakpoint. So if you guys remember, that break helper point right here is already set to seek to the surface, right? So if you're in that fill condition, it's going to jump over to here somewhere, right? So I got the same situation where I want the, instead of having the breakpoint move to either the outside point or the helper point, now I'm going to say I want the actual outside of this bench to either go to where I hit ground or where I hit this checkpoint, this 8 foot, this point I can't go past. Um, so when I do that and I hit OK, granted this is just test data, so you probably wouldn't have a bench that small. But you see in this case, instead of going to the checkpoint, it said, "Oh, I can't go to the checkpoint. I got to go to the ground." Um, and then if I look up at the one bench above it, I didn't do that. I just said go tie to my checkpoint, and so it tied directly to my checkpoint. So depending on what your conditions are out there, how you want to handle it, that could be one way to handle is, I kind of call this more of a silver frill approach where we're tying to that minimum. Now, granted, if you have to remove a bunch of bad soil or something, then you wouldn't tie to that point. You probably have to take out more, maybe depending on what you're dealing with. But I felt like that might be a good approach. So I wanted to ask for your guys' feedback. So if you guys could post in this special benching form number 1, if you guys click on that link, there's a couple questions real quick if we could fill out so I can get an idea. I'll bring it up on my end. So first one, should I control the bench widths together or separately? So when I was talking about that label on that point, bench width one, should I just set up the defaults to be controlling each one separately, or do you want them to be all controlled together? Kind of a default setting. You can obviously change it pretty easily after the fact, but just curious. The second question, um, so that sliver fill template that I just showed, where I switched the points to be constrained about the checkpoint. Do you think I should have another set of templates to handle that all from the start? So you have kind of the one where it's a bench width control, just straight bench width, and then another set where it's already set up to be tied to that checkpoint. I'm kind of leaning towards having 2 sets to start off with, so you could just kind of choose, I'm going into the silver repair or I'm going into like a slope repair situation. I don't know. You guys let me know. The last one, when I talked about those crossover breakpoints, should I set the template up to automatically seek to the surface to kind of cut off that fill condition? Or I'm leaning towards having it in there from the start. That's why you guys don't have to add it. Granted, if you don't run into that situation, you won't really see it. But curious to see. I kind of figured separately. Kind of figured separate ones for those. Yeah. All right. So I'll have another one at the end, and you guys can type in some suggestions too as well. Just try not to bash me too bad. So moving on, because I know we're almost out of time, but I think, well, not almost out of time, like the scheduled time, but I started this out saying we're probably going to go like a half hour over. So you guys keep filling those out if you want, but I wanted to go over another option you guys have, and I kind of want to be very cautious about telling you guys to use this because it does affect a lot of other things, and that is the edit station option. So edit station lets you kind of edit the template at a given station, and you just do whatever you want with it, and that's what it'll be. The problem is that once you go to edit station, it overrides a lot of things. So for starters, if you try to add a new component in, it won't be able to draw that in. You won't see it unless your adjacent drop locations also have those new components because it won't know how to connect the points together. The revisions to your corridor modeling after you add edit station are pretty much neglected at that station. So what I mean is like if you edit a station and then you come back later and do a point control or parametric constraint, it's going to apply that parametric constraint everywhere except that edit station because it's going to get to that edit station and it's going to say, oh, you wanted this station to be specifically like this. So it kind of gets away from using corridor edits. Your end conditions will no longer seek. So if they were seeking something like a surface or something, I'm not going to do it anymore. They also lose their point constraints. The projected surface constraint no longer works. So any kind of seeking points don't really work anymore once you go into edit station. And then I think if you had a point that had a point control, they lose their constraints. So when you go into edit template, there's no constraints on those points anymore. So I want to be kind of cautious right up the start and said if you use this, you got to be careful because it might mess up other people working on your project. So I kind of say, if there's a roadway work involved, maybe this isn't the best approach, but if it's only like a slope repair and nothing else, then this might be a viable solution because you don't really have, other people that might do corridor edits. So I want to show a quick video on that, and then we'll do earthwork quantities, which is some pretty cool stuff that we haven't shown before either. So if you can stick around, I think I'm going to show some cool stuff. So I'm back in here in my corridor file, and I'm going to show this edit station option. So if I right click inside this cross section, this dynamic cross section view, there is an option called edit station. So let me jump forward here. So I'm going to click on that edit station. And it's going to bring up what looks like a template editor dialog, but it's slightly different. So for starters, what you'll see is you actually get existing ground showing up. You don't normally get that on edit template. You're also at that right location horizontally and vertically. So in a little bit, the video moves over and you'll see that the elevations listed are the actual elevations at this given station. You'll notice my end condition seek points, they all lost their constraints like I said they would. Now they lost their constraints for two reasons. A, it's an end condition, and B, I had a point control on it. You also notice that my end condition up here lost its constraints because it's an end condition. Okay. So moving on, some things we can do in here is this is intended to basically be the way it looks is what you get. So if you want a point to be at a certain spot, you move that point to that spot, it's going to stay there. All right, that's kind of the intent behind this edit station. So I see this being more of kind of what people did before with drawing on the cross sections, but you get a little bit more control with the constraints that are in there to kind of hold your constraints the way you need to. So I can come in here and I can edit a point, maybe move something. Let me jump forward, save some time here. I must like to talk a lot. Okay, so I come in here and I could change a value pretty easily, right? I want this bench width to be, something less. And again, it wouldn't matter if you had a parametric constraint. Your that you made earlier. Now this edit station is taking over, is taking priority. Maybe I want to change the elevation of something, so I could come to my helper point. Oh, I jumped ahead of myself. So you notice once I move that none of my seek points are really working, right? So this break condition that I was running into, those seek points, they're not going to work anymore. So that horizontal and vertical minimum, it's just not going to work. So really what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come into this point and say, well, since I'm editing the station, I don't really care about having that logic. I'm just going to get rid of this constraint and I'll move the point to where I want it to be. So I'll come up there and I'll just move point. And you can do snapping, but it doesn't have like an intersection snap. So if I get to my my existing ground line, you see how it's snapping to it, but it's not an intersection snap. So you just kind of have to eyeball it, which is good enough, to be honest with you. You just come in here and you can get it to snap, just not at the intersection. So you eyeball it up here and you just click. Okay. So the constraints don't really matter because I'm just gonna set to where it is. Like, 'cause that's the main point of using edit station is you just want to look the way you're editing it. Okay, so I think next I was going to do just changing the elevation. I wanted to show that you can still use your dynamic settings. So if I wanted to change the elevation of something, I can come over to one of those elevation points. I can right click on it and say move point. And I can come over to my dynamic settings and I can say, you know what, I want this to be a specific elevation, which is XY. So if I change my drop down there to XY, I can key in an X and a Y. And so this elevation point, it doesn't matter where it's at horizontally, right? The only thing that I care about is where it's at vertically. So I can just key in any X that I want. Now I'll probably keep it close to where it's at. So that's around 230. So I'll key in an X value of maybe 235, comma, and then what elevation do I want at? So if I zoom over, you see that it is at that elevation. You can use those Y values as elevations. So I could just key in an elevation and hit enter, and it'll move that point to the XY. Okay. So you still have, I think this is a highly underutilized thing in templates. There's a bunch more options in there too, but so after you're done and you hit OK, what you'll see is it adds a yellow or goldish dotted line to represent a single station edit. And if I come and look at my like a corridor objects, it'll be in there as a template drop, but as a single station drop. So you know, if I click on it here, which I should do in a second, there you'll see that start and end station are the same. So it's representing a single station drop. Now, if you need to come back and edit a station edit, you do not want to do it from the template dialog. You don't want to click this because that's not going to bring up edit station. That's going to bring up just your regular edit a template dialog, which won't have anything to do with like the elevations or um, or any kind of edits that you've already made in that current station edit. It's just bringing up your template dialog. As you see, you don't see the existing ground. So you don't want to do that way. That'd just be like editing a drop. What we want to do is we want to go back to that dynamic cross section, right click and hit edit station, and then it'll bring you back into where you'd want to make some additional edits if you needed to. Okay. So that is edit station. I'm gonna jump forward, save some time here. Again, you really want to be cautious using that. If you have a roadway project and they might be doing some kind of like corridor edits, you could really start having them get mad at you because they're like, they may not realize that these single station edits are taking priority, and they'd be like, well, why isn't it roadway doing what I want it to do? So uh, again, it's there, it's useful, but maybe in a limited capacity. So wanted to show it because I think it is useful. I just make sure everyone understands the side effects of using that. So I talked about earlier, if you maybe you need 6 benches, I don't have a starting template. I'll have a video that shows you how to drag those in and how to fix them up. But for time constraints, I just pulled that out. Okay, so now the last topic we're going to talk about is earthwork, which I think this is some pretty cool stuff. So I would say first you want to wait till you're done with your special benching before you start working on generating these earthwork quantities. I tried my best to have it just be completely automated and just kind of run your cut fills and you're done. But it's a little bit of multi-step approach, and I'll explain why. But still, um, it's still doing your end area automatically. So what we're gonna do is first I'm gonna create some files to hold some different things. So I'm creating two KD files. One's gonna be to hold my alternate surface, and maybe my cut volume, or you could separate your cut volume out to another one, and then I'll make another one to make a new complex terrain. Okay, you'll see why we're making those files here in a second. So after I create them, let me jump forward. Oh, another thing, make sure you pull the 2D seed file for your alternate surface one, and not the default that's 3D. We need to start out with a 2D one, so make sure you change that when you're going to create this alternate surface here. Okay, so I'll jump over. I've already added in some references to save some time, but basically I've added in your corridor alignment, you know, existing surface, those kind of things. All right, so what I want to do is I want to create an alternate surface that represents my bench, right? So you start out your existing surfaces like this, and then the contractor is going to go through and cut your benches out, and so you'll end up with this bench cut out, right? So I need that surface to help me generate my quantities. All right, so the way we're going to do that is through alternate surfaces. And so what I've done on the template already is I've put on these points a name for alternate surface. So that's already done. You don't have to do it. So let me open. Come on. So what you see, and I jumped too far. Trying to save some time, right? So alternate surface is in a point property, and I labeled it SB for special benching. Okay. So I've done that on a bunch of these points here. Not the outside point, which you'll see in a second why. But if I go to my active template and I can look at my alternate surface, I can see all of these points that already have the alternate surface defined on it. Okay. And so what it'll do is it'll actually use those points and it'll generate a surface for me. So let me go over into this import terrain tool. There's a create corridor alternate surfaces tool. So it does exactly what you think it does. So locate your corridor, and then it will generate the surface. And so unfortunately, at first, it doesn't have a feature definition. So we're going to just select it and give it a feature definition. But you kind of see that white graphic that came in there. So if I turn off some levels, you'll see it better here. It's just that white surface there that represents the benching. So I come over, I'll give it a feature definition. And before I made this video, I didn't have one made, but after I made the video, I went ahead and made a feature definition for this. I actually made a couple for alternate surfaces just in case you have other situations where you might have, dealing with more alternate surfaces. So you will see that there are actual feature definitions to choose now. So I did that, and on cross section you see it turn blue there, and you see how it didn't include that little fill section because we didn't want it to, because that outside point does not have an alternate surface defined on it. Just those breakpoints do. So as the breakpoint move out, it creates that surface the way we want to. Okay. So now that we have this surface, what we need to do is generate the cut quantity. So we from our existing grading to our benching, that's all going to be cut. So what we want to do is create a 3D mesh that represents that quantity. Okay. So I will come up to my tools up here under, I think, model detailing. Yep. And there is a create closed mesh option. And so we're going to create a closed mesh. So we'll use that tool. And the mode or the method that we want is element to element. So you see there's a couple different options. So you can do element to depth, but in this case we have two two surfaces, and so we want to make sure we use the feature definition special benching cut. That feature definition is set up so that the quantities were automatically included only as cut. So you want to make sure you use that. And then what we'll do is we'll follow the prompts. You can give it a name if you want, maybe a special benching cut. And so I'm going to accept my method, and then I'm going to select my top surface, which will be my existing terrain. And then I'll select my bottom surface, which will be that benching alternate surface that I just made. Okay, and then I'll accept my feature definition, and it'll go through and it will create a closed mesh. So you can see it there. If I change some levels around, you can kind of see it coming through on the cross-section view there. You notice it doesn't pull in that fill condition. We don't want that. We're not even going to show that going on. Okay, so that was our cut quantity. What do we need to do next? We need to get the template so that it can figure out the fill quantity, right, from this bench all the way up to the grading. So how are we going to do it? Oh, there's the I put a screenshot in here of the new feature definitions that I've just added that'll go out with the next update. So you have kind of 5 alternate surface feature definitions to kind of help you out as you do more with these alternate surfaces. So now, kind of finishing things off here, what we need is to basically create a new existing post benching surface or terrain. Okay, so our active surface right now is our existing conditions out there, but in order for the cut fill quantities to work, it just can't figure out how to go between like 2 different surfaces. So you got your proposed surface, you got your benching surface, and you got your existing surface, right? It just can't. It doesn't have the power or the knowledge of how to figure out which one it should go to. So we just handled the cut quantity. So now we want to create a surface that represents our existing conditions after the bench has been cut out. Okay. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create a complex terrain. And so I did go into a separate file and just referenced in those 2 surfaces. And I recommend doing that. And so in this complex terrain, I'm going to take my existing terrain and move that over. That's my primary terrain. So that's like the one you start out with. That's the one that your active surface is normally. And then I'm going to take my alternate surface. I'm going to add that in, but I want to make sure I choose the merge action. Okay. What merge means is it basically will merge the 2 surfaces together, but anywhere they overlap, it will take the merged surface, which is our alternate surface. So it's basically cutting out existing where the alternate surface is and putting in the alternate surface. If you choose append, it will just keep all the points from both surfaces and make some weird combination. So don't do that. You'll know instantly. You'll get some weird result. Okay. And then next we can give it a feature definition. So again, when I created the video, I didn't have one made, but I went ahead and made one called like existing intermediate surface. I'll show a screenshot here in a second. So I just chose, I think, triangles 2, but there will be one in there now to represent like an intermediate surface. So you can give it a name, maybe like existing post benching or something. I don't know. After benching or something, existing terrain, whatever you want it to be. So I'll finish, and it will generate a new terrain for me. Okay. So you kind of see I have this new terrain that's a complex between those 2 terrains that I had. So now if I jump over, I've added that reference into my corridor file. And what I want to do now is you can kind of see it show up in your cross section right there. That's that new surface. When I get to the next step, to get my cut fill quantities, I need to make this new terrain my active surface so that when it generates cut fill quantities, it kind of knows this is the surface that I want to use. Now, when you make it active, it it will probably mess up that benching template, right? Because some of those points were seeking active terrain, right? And so now that I've changed my active terrain, I might see some differences um, happen. And so really we don't need our benching template anymore, right? We have a surface that represents that will show up on our cross section. So for the time being, while we generate our quantities, let's just turn off the benching. And so I made that easy to do. So if we jump over to our template, there is a point at the top called display controller. And so if I do a test on it horizontal, the second it moves anywhere other than the location it was tied to, it's going to turn off all of that benching stuff for you. So I've set it up to just be a simple display rule. You see there's this display controller constraint, or not display rule, I'm sorry. It's just a label on that constraint. So second, what we're going to do is add a parametric constraint to move that point, which then would trigger my display rule. Okay, so that might have been a lot, but really all we're doing is we're going to say, hey, take that display controller point and change the horizontal constraint off of 0 to something else, and that will trigger my bench to not display. So I'll just do it for the whole distance. So I choose my display controller label here, and then the values don't matter as long as it's not 0. So I could just say I want, maybe 2. Okay, so move that point, and I'll accept it, and it will move that point and remove that from my template or my quarter. Now it is just a parametric constraint, so you can easily go into quarter objects and toggle it on and off. So if you want it to come back on, if you're doing other things or something, you can easily just toggle it on and off. Okay, so now that I have that done, the next step is to, I believe, generate our cut fill graphics. Let's jump forward. So all I did is I switched to another file to create my cut fill graphics. All right. So when you do this, you got to be careful on what you reference in, because it's going to just look at everything and see what's classified as existing, what's classified as design. So don't just go ahead and reference everything in, or you're going to get some weird results. So I pretty much only have my corridor file and my new intermediate surface, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go to that tool to generate cut fills. So if you guys missed that, I can jump back here. It's just under the analyze quantities, create cut fill volumes. Okay. So in here, I have the feature definition set for my cut and fill, and I don't want to compute unsuitable or custom or substrat or anything. So I left all those as no. So I'll data point, and it will go through and generate cut fill graphics along this everything in this model. Okay. So I turn some things on and off. I'll just turn off like everything for my corridor, and I'll turn on these cut fill graphics, and you kind of see there's the fill that it figured out, and it looks like there's a little cut piece over by the roadway. So now I have created 3D meshes for pretty much all the quantities that I'm going to deal with. So let's go cut cross sections. All right. So I'm going to jump over to new file for the cross sections. Jump forward here. All right, so I'm in a new file. I added some references in, and I'm going to create some name boundaries. All right, so just like hopefully you guys are used to creating cross sections. So name boundaries, 1 to 10 scale. I'll pick my alignment, and then I will kind of give starting point. And notice that my offset, the way I had it set up, since this is so far to the one side, I'm just going to change my offsets. I think I made it a little too big, but so it'll go a little over my sheet, but that's not really what we're showing. We just want to show you that quantities, how it does the cut fill quantities for you. Okay, so I can give it some end and change the interval to maybe 50 feet. Jump forward a little bit here, so change that to 50. And then what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to check on create drawing because I'm not ready to create that drawing yet. Okay, I just want to place my name boundaries. Okay, let me jump forward here. All I'm doing is placing name boundaries. Okay, so after they are placed, you'll see it places the name boundary graphics. And what we want to do now is we want to run a report. So under that civil analysis, there is an end area volumes report. And so what we want to do is we want to run that. So go there and we'll run the end area volumes report. And then we're going to click a name boundary group. Okay, so I just made that cross section boundary group. So I'm going to click that because that's what I want to calculate my end areas based off of these cross sections, right? So I don't need to exclude any. So if you had like a bridge or something you need to exclude, you have an option to exclude some, but I don't need to. So I ran that report. It comes up with this table of cut fill quantities, from station to station. But the real important thing that this did is it actually tagged this data to each of those name boundaries. So if I click on one of those, there's a property in there. I should zoom over there in a second. In there under the civil properties, end area volume, XML fragment or something. So the key thing to note is that those name boundaries now have that kind of cut fill data attached to it. So now when I'm ready after I run that report, I can create my sheets and you'll see how it annotates my cut fill quantities for me. So I'll go back to my name boundaries and I'll create the sheets now. Scoot forward a little bit, accept all my settings. It'll go through and generate my drawing models and my sheets. Now, granted, I didn't set up level display. I'm not here to show you that. So they don't, cross sections don't look like typically we would show them. But what I really want to showcase here is that cut fill table. All right. So you'll see how it's putting in the cut fill areas and the cut fill volumes. When you look at the quantities alone, it's enough to really tell you that it picked up both your benching cut and your fill. So that part is pretty nice. Now, granted, I know there's situations where it's not as simple as just cut fill. So there's some other things to be looked at still, but in that case, that's the earthworks. All we're doing is we're creating that cut quantity in a new surface, and then you normally would have generated your cut fill quantities anyway. So it's just kind of adding those just 2 extra steps to the way when you go to do your earthwork quantities. So hopefully that's pretty cool to people. So I know I'm coming up on the hour and a half here, so I'm about done. There's that new feature addition that I made. I just called it intermediate surface. So you'll see that in the standards too with the next update. So some other things working on is I kind of brought it up before with the silver fill templates. So you can see that the bench width, is tied to your 8-foot minimum offset. So it sounds like I might be adding that to it, the template. And then I wanted to mention that I was also like working on a bottom up template. So this might be used more limited. I don't think this would be the widespread use, but there's probably some cases that come up from time to time where you might need to do something like that. And the other thing would be dealing with more than just cut fill quantities. Like if you got some kind of rock that you're throwing down or something. Right now, the software to populate that table, that cut fill table, right now it's only cut fill quantities. But I do believe that they were adding capability to throw more stuff in there. I haven't verified that yet. I believe you can still run other reports and get those quantities. There was, or maybe not, but that's something that I'm looking more into still. But overall, that's kind of what I came up with for dealing with special benching. I don't think that it's, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a highly customized thing that happens with special benching. So, um, all the work they did on each individual cross section, taking that into a model approach, there's going to be maybe some changes to workflow. So this is kind of what I came up with. If you guys have other ideas, I'd love to hear them. So I put in another link there for another form I'd like you guys to fill out. Um, so the first question is this an acceptable workflow for special benching? Just curious on what your guys' thoughts are for what I've shown. And then a couple of questions like, what did you like about this workflow? What didn't you like? And then do you have any suggestions, recommendations? So by all means, I am not sitting here saying that I'm an expert on special benching. I've talked to several people now, and I've looked at several plan sets, try to get a better idea of kind of the workflows that people are doing and what they might need. So if I miss the mark a little bit, I can hear those suggestions and we can see what we need to tweak, see if we come up with something better. But I will say I think we did get, I don't know, 4 or 5 support requests on this topic. So hopefully you guys learned a lot. Even if you don't do special benching, I think we did show a lot of things that you probably haven't used before, like alternate surfaces, closed 3D meshes, the horizontal vertical minimum, point constraints. I think there's a lot of stuff that you might be able to use in other cases that you got to see through this webinar. So if you guys could, fill out um, those forms. You can always fill them out after the meeting ended as well. I'll probably put these links on the wiki page when I post the recording as well. But that's all I have, I guess, to finish up. To-do list for this is to release the top-down, actually release them, which hopefully I can release here this week or next week. I might quickly throw in those sliver-filled top-down templates. Post a bunch of videos, so a lot of what I showed I'm going to segment into separate videos. I also am putting together a document for those guys that like the documentation of this stuff. And then I guess finish out. This should probably say bottom up. But yeah, so that's coming. So the next release, I'll start pushing out some of these updates here. Thanks for watching, and our next webinar will be in August, which we have not announced a topic or date yet. So look for that coming in that email if you're on our mailing list. If you guys have suggestions on things you'd like to see, feel free to shoot that our way. But hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys next time. Actually, I should probably check the chat, right? Do anyone have any questions? I should open it up for questions, right? Getting ahead of myself. If you guys are still here and you want to comment, you have any suggestions, if you want to say something, go for it. Let's see here. There's a let's see what the chat is. Looks like we need additional check at the top where the existing slope meets the new outside slope. It will need to be 8 feet as well. This typically requires that cut into. Okay. To simplify the top-down approach, why not use a fixed bench height instead of fixed elevation? The benches then are parallel to the profile grade. So in a roundabout way, you could do that by offsetting your profiles. Um, from I guess when I looked at the sample plans that had it, it just seemed like the elevations were changing more than being a standard. But yeah, that's something that can be done. Just switching the constraints around. Um, but there is no check for a bench height either. So if you put in like a stupid high bench height, I think it's like what is it 20 feet or something? I forget what the note says, but you obviously have to watch out for that too.
Yeah. Hey, JD, this is Steve. That was my comment.
Okay.
And I had done some modeling with benches, and again, you're absolutely right. There is no per se standard bench height that's somewhat project specific. But what I had done was I had basically set my constraints to the bench height, and if the 10-foot made sense on a project, I used 10-foot and used parametric constraints so I could control it. And it just seemed like it was a lot less work than what it looked like you were doing with the profiles. And then the other thing with that is how I had set mine up is definitely needed to be able to control the height of the first bench separately. And then what I did was sort of like a typical bench height, but the first one was separate because the project I was working on, I had the first bench, it was critical to miss utilities, so, and anyways, like I say, it was, that worked well for me. And then the other thing that I guess I was kind of thinking about is how you defined your horizontal bench width. That was kind of a property I never defined exactly. I was almost always used the 8 foot from the proposed or the helper point where the existing was. It never really even bothered to explicitly define, how much of a horizontal bench they cut.
Yep. Yeah, and that's that alternative, that one I showed where you could switch it to
Yep.
that. But
Yep.
I think where I was going with that one was if you're in like a repair where you got to remove a bunch, like you might not be anywhere close to that 8 foot. So yeah, I didn't know if anyone would actually use that. I mean, they could always just
Right.
offset more from the 8 foot. The thing with the parametric constraints, for like your bench height, is just kind of what I was saying for the bench width. Is it's not bad unless you have a lot of changes, because then you have a lot of parametric constraints you have to add.
Right.
That's why I liked what the profile was. You could draw on your top one, and if that's the one that's varying, after you have that done, you can just offset it down the standard height that you might want, and then you would have that standard bench height, if you will, and it would be actually ruled to the top one in a similar
Right.
manner. But yeah, there's always more ways to do it.
Yep.
I like the profile view of being able to see it. I don't know if anyone else did or not, but you kind of see if you're jogging it up and down more, like if you're shooting something up when maybe
Right.
you shouldn't be, things like that. But yeah, it's definitely I learned a lot more about special benching than I ever thought I would. Um, so yeah, I'm definitely, we can set up different templates. Maybe we have a couple different starting points. Maybe the way people might like to control their stuff or the way they think they would like to work. So another, let's see here. I've had issues with table editor removing the graphic profile grips, grids, lengths. Is this a glitch? Is there a known fix? I do not know. I'd have to check on that, Matt. Like Steven, you said GP2 figures 2-3 show ending the horizontal bench at the existing ground and starting a new 1-to-1 cut. Yeah, I don't know at what point in the meeting you said that. I don't know if that was before I showed chopping it off.
Yeah, I think that was
Okay.
before you're chopping it off. And like I say, that's, I think how you slide that helper point over, and then really what I would do was start my next 1-to-1 cut where that point got slid over to, and instead of
Okay.
having, if you will, that imaginary projected point.
Yeah, the thing that I was also trying to maintain is that alternate surface, and making sure that it, like the way it's set up now, you don't have to really worry about it. The way all the points are there, so it'll just all the points have the right names, so that when you generate that alternate surface, you don't have to worry, and it connects it together right. As you if you start, I guess you can make the 1 point a null point, and then it would get rid of the fill condition.
Right.
Too.
I guess what I would do is I would have a null point for 8 foot over, a null point over for existing ground. Then I would have my real point be the min or the max of them, depending on which way you're measuring. And then just have that the real point be the one included on your alternate surface.
Yeah, in a roundabout way, that's what I did. I guess it's just, I called it the helper point that seeks the ground.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I was talking about. That's a null, and then like you say, the 8 foot over the null, and then the real point being the the min or the max of the two.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's what I'll do with that. Like I'll call it like a sliver fill or something. I don't know what to call them just yet, but it would be set up like that. Like that last video I showed before edit station. But yeah. So I know we are well over time. I think that was a good discussion we had there. Steve, we can talk more offline too, as well.
Absolutely, I'd like to, look forward to that. See what you're going with, and again, I don't know how much of what you looked at, what I've done on a few projects at Geauga 322. I can send you a PID on that. Is that was kind of one of ODOT's ORD pilot projects. I don't know if you remember that one or not. Maybe not.
I looked at like, I don't know, 7 or 8 different plans that had special benching. I can't remember
Yeah.
which ones, but
Yeah. No, and again, I was fighting other things because that was in beta standards. So and the storm on it was ugly.
yeah. Well, let's see. Just before we ended, I saw one. I meant to bring this up about starting at bottom of the slope. I don't know, the way the GB2 note reads, it just reads more top down, as well as if you start at the bottom, now you got a lot more to worry about at the top of if you're going too far in, like, tearing out more pavement, things like that. I will say you could take this top down approach and kind of change it to control like the top and bottom and make the middle. But yeah, I meant to bring that up, so I saw that comment. It just seemed like when I looked at the plans, it seemed like the top horizontal location was pretty much always being held in almost all the plans I looked at. So I'm not saying that that the way you're doing it is wrong or bottom up, but it just seemed like from what I was looking at and the way the GB2 note reads, it was really gearing towards top down. But yeah, if you made that comment, you're more than welcome to reach out. We can talk about it and see the reasoning behind doing it that way. So, all right, I think we've gone well over time. So thank you guys. So the ones of you that are still hanging out, I'll get this recording posted here and fill out those forms if you could. I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts, and then we'll send out the next webinar update hopefully soon. So see you guys next time.